Hello there, Year 12. Today we're moving on to our next migration case study, which is our second out of the three, looking at an advanced country. So today we're going to be looking at the USA and its migration policies, how migration has changed over time in the USA, and perhaps what opportunities and challenges this might cause. This is a very relevant case study, and I would really urge you to keep your eye on the news because Donald Trump keeps changing the USA's migration policy, and you'll see a little bit today about why that's quite significant. So today you will, by the end of this session, know the patterns of emigration and immigration in the USA over time. You'll be able to explain how this has caused interdependence over time, and then you'll be able to examine the opportunities and challenges that this migration. The first thing we're going to look at then is the patterns of emigration and immigration in the US. So on your worksheet, I've asked you, once you've heard me talk about the features and the patterns, I'd like to summarise into at least 4 bullet points the key features of USA migration. So here I have got 2 different graphs. The first one on the left shows the main contributors to the immigrant population in the USA. So here you can see Mexico is the biggest, and then India and China are reasonably similar. If we think about why this might happen, okay, you might have a think about the fact that Mexico is a border country. Therefore, you've got the world's largest bilateral flow of migrants, mainly Mexicans going into the USA, immigrating, but also some USA citizens emigrating to Mexico. With regards to India and China, and the Philippines to some extent, the more technical jobs and highly trained migrants and graduates are likely to be immigrating into the USA. The other graph on the right shows you the size of the immigrant population. And as you can see, the immigrant population has increased. It's increased rapidly since 1970. But over the last between 2010 and 2013, that increase had started to slow down. In 2013, there were 41.3 million immigrants living in the USA. So 13% of the USA's total population was people that had moved to the USA from abroad. It included 78 nationalities with over 50,000 people each, and 9 nationalities that had over 1 million people. The main contributors, as we've already said, were Mexico, India, China, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Vietnam, El Salvador, Cuba, and South Korea. You can see that on the graph. There has been a rapid growth, as I said, in the number of immigrants entering the USA in the 21st century, but this has started to decrease this rapid increase recently. So now what I'd like you to do is go to this website. Okay, it's about migration policy, and I've put a table from 1960s to 2018. And what I would like you to do is for each of those years to tell me what are the top 3 countries migrants have emigrated from. Let's have a look at the pie chart, and just the ones that talk about countries, what are the top 3 countries for each of those time periods. So here you'll see that's what the pie chart will look like. That's the pie chart for 2018. We're now going to think about, well, lots of people are moving to the USA. Well, why are they moving to the USA? And here I'm going to be talking through the information on page 234 of your textbook. So if you want to follow along, then that's where I've got the information from. So the first reason for the attractiveness of the USA to immigrants is the positive immigration policy. They have been encouraging for many years people to move to the USA. If you move, you have the reasonable possibility of attaining a green card, so becoming a permanent resident. And if you think a lot of these people are moving from less developed nations, and therefore the opportunities in the USA are significant. One of those opportunities is employment for both low and high skilled workers. So that's why you have people coming from Mexico, India and China across a range of different countries. With regards to this employment, wages differ significantly from between source countries such as Mexico and the host country of the USA. And because you're going to be earning a lot more if you move to the USA, you therefore have an opportunity to send remittances. In addition, the USA, being an advanced country, has a better education system and more educational opportunities and access to other services such as health. The next reason is that lots of people historically have moved to the USA and perhaps left their families behind, and the USA's migration policy really encourages family reunification, so families coming back together. So that's a very significant reason. And finally, the USA has always had a very positive policy about bringing refugees and admitting refugees into the country. So the USA is a country of net migration gain. However, in 2013, 2.98 million US citizens lived abroad. So here to compare, you had 41.3 million immigrants and 2.98 million emigrants. So it's a very significant immigration. However, out of those 2.98 million people moving abroad, the main destinations were Mexico, Canada, the UK, Puerto Rico, Germany, Australia and Israel. This is largely explained by the return of migrants from the USA back to countries such as Mexico and other Latin American countries. In addition, a number of highly skilled workers in education, IT and communications have also migrated to countries with political, economic and historical ties, such as Canada, the UK and other EU countries. So, the migration policy of the USA then. The Immigration and Naturalisation Act is the body of law which governs current immigration policy. There are periodic amendments, including the Immigration and Nationality Acts, and later on I will direct you to have a look at one of these. It allows an annual worldwide limit of 675,000 permanent immigrants, and I just want you to take 30 seconds to think back to our lesson on different government policies. If it's 675,000 immigrants a year, what type of policy is that? So that type of policy is a quota system. Okay, you've got as many as 675,000 permanent immigrants, and so you've got a number that you are allowing into your country every year. So very different to some of the other systems that we were looking at in that government policy lesson, which was mainly based around skills tests. There are 5 key elements of the USA's migration policy. The first one is family reunification. So 480,000 visas, so a very, very significant amount of the visas, are available per year for families to join US citizens or legal residents already in the country. The next is the admission of migrants with skills valuable to the US economy. Here there are 140,000 visas available for highly skilled workers, which are normally sponsored by an employer for a specific job offer. Protecting refugees. The numbers of admissions is decided each year. In 2013, the ceiling was 70,000, apportioned by major world region. The USA has traditionally been a hotspot for refugees seeking asylum. Promoting diversity. The Diversity Immigrant Visa Programme makes available 50,000 immigrant visas annually, drawn by random selection of individuals from countries with low rates of immigration to the USA. In 2014, they mainly went to African countries. So here, rather than saying you just want your skilled workers, for example, like the UK is going to, here the USA is saying, okay, most of our migrants come from Mexico, China, India. We want a diverse migrant population, and therefore we will offer a number of visas to people that wouldn't normally come to the USA. And finally then, humanitarian relief. The USA offers temporary visas that are available each year for relief from natural disasters or ongoing armed conflict. So here, we just looked at what the traditional migration policy of the USA has been, and I asked you to make notes on those 5 key features. But actually, it's changing a lot. It's a really, really relevant case study, as I said at the beginning. And here I've asked you to go and look at 4 key websites or articles to talk about, well, how has the new Trump administration really affected migration? So part A is, okay, what were they expecting to do anyway? And part B is, well, how have they used the coronavirus as an excuse to change the migration policy? So they haven't had to go through the long laws and procedures that perhaps traditionally migration policies would have to have gone through. So I want you to read through these 4, and then I would like you to just bullet point some of the key changes Trump has introduced, because this is what in your answers is going to get you those highest marks, having that relevance. So now you've looked at the policy of the USA, the migration policy. Well, how does that influence interdependence between countries? So the best example here to look at, and that I've asked you to look at, is the world's largest bilateral migrant corridor between the USA and Mexico. So in 2013, over 11.5 million Mexicans lived in the USA and 1 million Americans in Mexico. Each of the 2 countries has its largest diaspora living in each other. There is growing social and cultural connectivity. Low-skilled Mexicans that often enter the USA illegally, hence the wall that Trump said he was going to build, contribute to the US economy by working in agriculture, construction and low-paid services. Wages in the USA are much higher than in Mexico, providing opportunity for remittances, which via formal channels amounted to 22 billion US dollars in 2013. That's 2% of Mexico's GDP. Since the formation of NAFTA, bilateral trade between the USA and Mexico has grown significantly. So NAFTA was the North American Free Trade Agreement, so reducing restrictions in trade between North American countries. This has led to trade, like merchandise between the 2 countries, accounting for $1.4 billion per day. The Mexican industry has benefited. For example, development of aerospace and IT sectors has been boosted mainly by investment from the USA. So FDI, if you're looking in the textbook, means foreign direct investment, investment from the USA in Mexico. And finally then, political power relations remain imbalanced, but increasingly there has been coordination and cooperation over issues in common. Now I think here it's really important to note that this textbook was written in 2016, and if you read the information on Trump, has this developed significantly since? I'll let you make that decision. So here, politics are trying to come to agreements over things like border security, the drug trade, human trafficking and environmental issues. If you have a look at the Colorado River Basin, you can have a look at, well, how has management between the 2 nations manifested itself, because it's a really good example. So if you look in your textbook, page 235, it tells you a website to go and have a look at for that. Finally then, we need to look at opportunities and challenges. So all of this is happening, and there are far more immigrants in the USA of Hispanic origin than any other group. What are the opportunities and challenges of migration in the USA? Now I have summarised these, they're on page 236. What you may wish to do is add a few more facts to your notes. But the key thing is the pattern is changing as a result of the declaration of the Mexican influx, tightening of border controls, increasing numbers of Mexican returnees, and growth in the numbers of Asian migrants, especially from China and India. In 2013, more immigrants entered the USA from each of China and India than Mexico. This trend provides new opportunities and challenges for the USA. So here I've given you some opportunities and challenges of migration for the USA. What I'd like you to do is first of all colour code, or in some way code, it can just be a P and an N, each statement. Is it a positive or a negative of migration? And then I'd like you to pick one positive and one negative and tell me, well, how will it affect the USA in the long term? And then in your own mind come to a judgment. Do you think migration is positive or negative for the USA, and why? Okay, to get the highest marks in this sort of question, it'd be really interesting to say traditionally the system has been very open, but perhaps more recently it's becoming more closed. Finally then, I've put a number of different articles for you to go and have a look at. Now these are not long articles, they're mainly newspaper reports, and it's just to try and get you thinking a bit more about what is changing in the USA's migration policy. As I said, this textbook is from 2016, it's about 4 years old, and therefore quite a lot of things have changed, and to get the highest marks I really need you to go and have a look at what's significantly changed since this textbook was published.